Welcome to the Explainer. Whenever we turn on the financial news, we are constantly bombarded with headlines about massive, multi billion dollar corporate mergers. And honestly, it's super easy to just think of these deals as big fish eating small fish, just corporate giants getting larger for the sake of it. But the reality is far more fascinating. Companies don't just merge to get bigger, they use distinct, highly calculated strategies to solve very specific corporate problems. So today, we're going to unpack the 5 unique types of mergers that companies use to survive, adapt, and absolutely dominate their markets.
Okay, let's dive right into this. What we have here is the complete map of corporate mergers. This gives us a really comprehensive overview of the 5 distinct categories we'll be exploring today: horizontal, vertical, conglomerate, congeneric, and reverse mergers. We're going to break down exactly how the first 4 types solve major operational and market problems, and then we'll look at how that 5th type acts as a pretty ingenious structural loophole. But before we get deep into the weeds, let's just clearly establish our foundational concept. At its very core, a merger is simply the unification of companies. However, as we'll see in a minute, this unification takes wildly different forms depending entirely on the strategic goal. It could be 2 fierce competitors joining forces or a completely private company acquiring what is basically just a public shell. It all comes down to what specific problem the company is trying to solve. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll tackle horizontal and vertical mergers. Then, conglomerate mergers, followed by congenerate mergers. After that, we'll look at the reverse merger shortcut. And finally, why these strategies actually matter in the real world. Section 1, horizontal and vertical mergers. Let's look at the 2 most intuitive strategies in the business world. Let's contrast these 2 right out of the gate because they represent entirely different approaches to growth. A horizontal merger happens when 2 companies in the exact same industry combine. Think of, say, Company A's factory merging with Company B's factory. On the flip side, a vertical merger isn't about competitors at all. It's a marriage between a buyer and a seller. It involves companies that have an actual or even a potential buyer-seller relationship coming together. So what specific problem does the horizontal merger actually solve? Well, the problem of too much competition. When 2 companies in the exact same industry consolidate, the market share of that new combined company naturally becomes significantly larger. The goal here is quite literally to move closer to being a monopoly, or at least a near monopoly. By joining forces, they effectively eliminate a competitor and dominate a much larger slice of their industry. And this brilliantly illustrates the contrast with the vertical merger. The vertical strategy solves the problem of supply chain reliance. Instead of looking sideways at a competitor, a company looks up or down its own supply chain. Imagine an upstream supplier factory merging with a downstream buyer storefront. When they come together, they create one fully integrated company. They aren't just selling to each other anymore, they literally own the entire process from production to retail. That is true vertical integration. Section 2, conglomerate mergers. This is where we shift into a strategy of massive diversification. A conglomerate merger involves firms engaged in completely unrelated types of business operations. They are not related horizontally, and they are definitely not related vertically. Just imagine Company A, a massive manufacturing plant, merging with Company B, an IT services firm, and Company C, a fast food chain. You take completely disparate industries, like making heavy machinery, writing software, and selling burgers, and you unify the whole shebang under one single flagship company. Now, what's really interesting about this is that in a pure conglomerate merger, there are literally no important common factors in production, marketing, or tech. So, what problem does this actually solve? It solves high-level financial and structural problems. The entire purpose of this merger is to better utilize overall financial resources, enlarge the new flagship company's debt capacity, and achieve a real synergy of managerial functions. They might not share a single factory part, but they share an incredibly powerful corporate treasury and top-tier management. Section 3, congeneric mergers. This introduces a concept that sits right between our first 2 categories. To really wrap our heads around this, let's contrast the congeneric merger against the conglomerate we just talked about. While a conglomerate has absolutely 0 important common factors in production or tech, a congeneric merger involves companies that are related. They share basic technologies, production processes, or target markets. The acquired company basically represents an outward extension of the product line, market participants, or technologies of the acquirer. Think of it this way. A congeneric merger solves the problem of a stagnant product line by representing an outward movement into related activities. Look at this analogy. You have company A making consumer electronics, like computer monitors, merging with company B making home appliances, like washing machines. They aren't the exact same product, sure, but they share overarching industry structures, base technologies, and likely the exact same consumer markets. Together, they create an expanded company with a deeply related but much, much broader product portfolio. Section 4, the reverse merger shortcut. Let's shift gears to a fascinating structural workaround rather than a traditional business expansion. Let's move to and see how this builds. A reverse merger is essentially a very specific two-step maneuver. Step 1. A completely private company goes out and acquires a public shell company. Now, a shell company is a public entity that doesn't really have active business operations. Step 2. As a direct result of that acquisition, the private company essentially absorbs that public status, instantly becoming a public entity itself with public shareholders.
So, the crucial point is, why do this? What massive problem is being solved here? Well, it solves a huge regulatory and time problem. Going public through traditional routes is notoriously lengthy, it's incredibly expensive, and it's a wildly complex process. By acquiring a public shell company that has already cleared all those regulatory hurdles, the private company can completely bypass that difficult traditional process. It is, without a doubt, the ultimate corporate shortcut to the public markets.
Section 5. Why mergers matter. Let's bring all these corporate strategies together to focus on the big picture.
When we look at the anatomy of a merger strategy, we can clearly see how each of these distinct frameworks solves a very specific structural need for a growing corporation. If a company's biggest problem is competition, they use a horizontal merger to secure market share. If their problem is supply chain vulnerability, they use a vertical merger to integrate and literally own the process. If they need to leverage financial synergy and debt capacity, they build a conglomerate. If they need to safely expand into related markets and tech, they execute a congeneric merger. And hey, if they need to go public fast, they use the reverse merger shortcut. 4 of these directly solve operational and market problems, while the 5th solves a massive structural hurdle.
Armed with this knowledge, you now understand the actual mechanics driving the biggest deals in the business world. So the next time a multi-billion-dollar merger hits the news headlines, don't just look at the massive price tag. Ask yourself, which of these 5 strategies are they really using? What specific problem are they trying to solve behind closed doors? Keep that in mind, and you'll be analyzing financial headlines like a true expert. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.